Hi, this is Dr. Clayton. Welcome to episode 12 of Hypnosis Chat. Today, I wanted to talk about an issue that affects really everybody. And so, when was the last time you noticed that a lot of things happen during the day? Most of them neutral, some good, some bad, and most people have a tendency to, whenever something good happens, we tend to either ignore it or take it for granted. But then if one bad thing happens, we tend to focus on it. And even one bad thing can ruin our day. And that is called the negativity bias. It is a normal effect that a lot of people have. Oh, thunder. Got a big thunderstorm out. It's for atmosphere.
It's scary.
It's okay. It's okay. We'll work on that another week. So negativity bias. A lot of people have it, and it's kind of our default behavior unless we fix it. And it's got evolutionary roots. Back in caveman days, if something good happened, great. Well, we don't need to spend any more energy thinking about it. But if something bad happens, we need to focus our energy on it. And a lot of times sometimes that's true. Nowadays, like if you are a house and you have a leak on the roof, well, that's something that requires energy to focus on. The problem is we use our negativity bias too much sometimes. And if one little thing happens, and it ruins our day, that can be very counterproductive. And it can lead to anxiety. And anxiety generally has three bad things about it. Number one, it doesn't feel good, and it tends to lead to other symptoms. So, such as insomnia. If you have too much anxiety, you can have insomnia, and then you get even less done and have even more anxiety. So it can be a downward spiral. Number two, it takes energy away from creating solutions and taking action. When you have anxiety, it requires energy to fuel that anxiety. So when you're worrying about something, it takes up energy and you become tired and you're not able to act as efficiently as you were before. And then number three, which is kind of related to that, is that not only does it take energy, but also while you're having anxiety, you're less likely to create solutions. Even if you have enough energy for it, you're less likely to create solutions. We tend to either worry about something or take action and come up with solutions. They tend to be psychologically and mutually exclusive. So when you have too much anxiety, it leads to a lot of problems, and people who are successful and happy tend to be more action-oriented and solution-oriented. So let's talk about this issue of, focusing on the one bad thing that happens and ignoring the 10 good things that happen. So have you ever experienced that, or can you remember experiencing that?
You might say that I'm a pro at that.
Oh, pro at that. Okay. Well, could you give us an example?
We're focusing on only the one.
Like when one negative thing happens.
Let's choose one negative thing. What do you mean? Like you're like to work or something? Or?
Yeah, like at work where like everything, like normally things go well. Like you have to deliver paper, so you staple it and you deliver it successfully. Great, that's a good thing, but we tend to ignore that.
Yeah.
And then,
however, you have a typo in one of your documents that you need to deliver. Of the 30 you deliver correctly, one has a typo.
Okay, good.
Maybe 2 periods instead of 1 at the end. Something really minuscule.
And that is a problem.
That's a big problem.
Okay. So, so that's a great example. So rather than, and of course it's important that you have no typos, but how we feel should be, and I've got a great example of this I'm going to share in a second, but how we feel should be a little more proportionate. How many good things, like if you do 29 good things and you mess up on one thing, you should at least feel still pretty good about that day. So let me give you another example. I really like this example. I just came up with it recently. If you are an investor and you invest in stocks and so on, you expect that some of your investments will lose money. You already know that's going to happen. So that's why you diversify your investments so that the bad things that will happen do not have a strong effect. And hopefully all the good things that happen will lead to, being in the black at the end of the day. So if I invest in 50 things and then 5 of them lose $1 and 45 of them gain $1, that's a great day. I had a great day that day. Now, isn't that interesting that we think about it that way with investing, but we don't think about that when it's personal things? And it would be useful to think about that with personal things. So, and besides, so why does that negativity bias not happen in investing? And the other effect I want to talk about is called the generativity effect. The generativity effect essentially says that anything that you come up with is more powerful than someone else coming up with that exact same thing. So if I come up with a great idea, like that investment example, it's a really, really great idea. But for someone else, it's just mildly useful. See what I mean? So now the thing with the generativity effect is if with investing, you're kind of detached from it because like, oh, the market didn't do well for those couple of stocks. But if like, oh, I put 2 periods in there, I did that typo, the generativity effect kind of makes it so it's important because I made that mistake. When in fact, it would be useful to kind of detach from that mistake and say, okay, well, overall things went really well.
See, I'm the type of person that would probably blame myself for the stocks not doing well because why did I put money in, the Bubblegum Corp when I knew the Bubblegum Corp was not going to be good 10 years from now?
Yes.
That's my fault.
Okay. Well, and that can lead to anxiety. So, and sometimes people do have, they personalize things, and a certain amount of personalization is useful. So for example, if we didn't personalize, I want you to think of everything as like a continuum. You can personalize things too much or not enough. So for example, the sort of person who doesn't take responsibility for anything, like they blame other people for how their kids behave, or they blame other people for their own behavior or whatever, those people don't personalize enough, one might say. Whereas someone like Anjali might personalize too much, where things that aren't even necessarily her fault, she's feeling responsible for. So now you don't have to be either way. You don't have to do one or the other. One of our goals in life should be to find a happy medium that is most useful. So for example, if there's like one idea might be, if there's things you can control, feel a little bit of responsibility for that. Like for example, with the stocks, for example, you might say, okay, did I make a good choice? Did I make a reasoned investment and then it just didn't do well for factors outside of my control? Then I'm not going to take responsibility for that. And I'm just going to not use that stock anymore. So, and it's good to say, if there's something that's not in your control, you shouldn't feel responsible for it. You should give yourself permission to not feel responsible for that. Oh, it's raining and the thunderclap interrupted my live broadcast. I'm not going to feel anything about that because there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just not going to worry about that. I give myself permission to not worry about that. And on the other hand, if there's something that I can control, depending on how much control I have over it, like for example, if it's something that, okay, well, I don't know if this Bubblegum Corp is going to do great, but I'm going to give it a try anyway because I like bubblegum, then, I take maybe a little responsibility for it because I didn't directly make it go down, but I maybe knew it might not have done as well as I'd hoped. So maybe I'll take a little responsibility and say, okay, in the future, I'm not going to let my personal feelings dictate my investments. And then on going even further, like, okay, well, I know this person isn't trustworthy at all. And I have multiple times in the past of them not being trustworthy, but I'll just loan them some money anyway. Then I might take even more personal responsibility. Okay, I knew it was a bad idea. It was my fault. I'm not going to do that anymore. So, but even then, you're not totally, blaming yourself. You're not 100% blaming yourself. You're just doing it enough to remind you not to make that mistake in the future. It's not going to be like, I'm staying up all night, with insomnia because I am so worried about me having already made this bad decision. So you should always be in that, 0 to 75% responsibility range. That's probably the most useful range to be in. And then there might even be use. Like, let's just say I just do something totally wrong and I knew it was wrong and I did it and it was premeditated, and then later I have to apologize. Then maybe I want to take 100% responsibility. So I guess there's use for everyone on the spectrum, but generally you should be, let's say 25 to 75%, because with most things in life, you do have at least a little bit of control. Not the thunderclap, but maybe a mistake. Maybe I'll I'll incorporate a policy to double check my grammar one more time or something like that. So let's say in that 25 to 75% responsibility would be the most useful place to be, where I can make changes, but also avoid some, some of the anxiety from becoming maladaptive. Okay, it makes sense. So let's see. Okay, so let's go back to this investment analogy. And I talked to someone the other day who made a mistake at his job, and it was a somewhat costly mistake. And even though he gets paid by the job that he does, and this one job he shouldn't have taken on, and it cost the company money. And he was really anxious about that. And then, he knew intellectually that the 11 other jobs he did that day made the company money, but that one job lost the money. And he was feeling really bad about that one job. And meanwhile, not feeling super good about those other 10 jobs. So part of it is seeing things like an investor is, okay, you expect that there will be mistakes occasionally. You're not looking for, did I make no mistakes? You're looking for, overall, was the benefit more than the consequence? Was the benefit greater than the consequence? Great, that was a winning day. We made money that day. That's what we want. So, and having that kind of attitude will help you depersonalize. If you over-personalize, which most people do, because of the negativity effect and the generativity effect, most people do over-personalize mistakes that they make. So being able to see it a little bit more like an investor will help detach that, which will decrease your anxiety, increase the solutions, increase your likelihood to have a solution and action-oriented mindset. Okay, let's see. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention about that. So an investor, and I should have mentioned this a little earlier, but all on the same idea. A good investor, if an investor were to never take any risks, he wouldn't make that much money. If an investor takes too many risks, he might lose everything. So the whole idea with investing is you want to balance the risk and take reasonable risks so that you are probably going to end up as much in the black as you can. So that's how you should see your own life also. So for example, let's go back to the documents analogy. You could, if you took no risk, that means you would check every paper 3 times, and it would take you the entire day to get all those papers out. You could do that, and you could be reasonably sure of never making a mistake. The problem is you'd be really, really slow. Mm-hmm. So you have to take some risk, and then going too far would be just whipping through each paper and just turning it in without even looking at it. That would be the opposite end of the spectrum. You'd get it done really fast, but you're taking too much risk. So life is about finding the balance in what is a reasonable amount of risk to take. Maybe just checking them once, maybe checking them twice, maybe, whatever it is. And that's a decision that everybody has to make. So your goal should not be, and this is a problem that perfectionists have, your goal should not be to get things perfect or not make any mistakes. Your goal should be to always find the optimal amount of risk to take so that you can maximize everything that you're doing, the time that you're saving with the product that you're producing. Okay, so think like an investor. That's lesson 1 for today. Okay, does that everything understandable? Any questions about that?
Yeah. How do you deal with if you're at work and you make that one mistake? How do you deal with somebody who focuses on that? That's probably why a lot of people get anxious, because like their your boss will say, but you did this, but how about those 11 other things? Like if somebody else focuses on that, how are you going to get out of that negative? I was just wondering that myself.
No, that's a good question.
How to get out of that mindset when so many people are focused, like businesses, a lot of times focus on, what you do, sometimes what you do wrong, I guess, because they don't want mistakes. So they tend to anyway, I don't know if I'm rambling, of
course not. No, that's a good question. And I would say, 2 things. Number 1, don't let other people's attitude change your own attitude. That person might be over focusing. He might be personalizing everything. He might have tons of anxiety at home. He might have insomnia, because he has too much anxiety. So number 1 is don't let that person's outlook change your outlook. You're still going to have this investor outlook of maximizing the benefit you get from finding a reasonable risk. And that means expecting that there are going to be mistakes sometimes. And if there's no mistakes that day, great. But even if there are, if you're more in the black than you are in the red, that's what you're going for. So, and how you judge that is up to your particular job. You have to make decisions about that. So, like, for example, you might have a job where your job is to make no mistakes. Like, you have to make no mistakes. And like, if you're, I don't know, a typographer for a court or something like that, or whatever. Right. So in that case, you're still doing the exact same thing. You are finding the optimal amount of risk, which might be a very low amount of risk. That might be optimal for your job. But still, it comes down to occasionally every single person in every job is going to make a mistake, and that's all there is to it. So not over personalizing those, but recognizing there's going to be mistakes sometimes, and what is an acceptable, just like an investor, what is an acceptable amount of loss? What's an acceptable amount of risk? What is an acceptable number of mistakes? So the first thing is, I would still hang on to that. What is the acceptable amount of risk to take, even if the other person is not like that? You owe yourself that for your own mental health. Okay. And then number two, more on the, what behavior, what should your response be? I mean, if they are like that, I mean, I would probably just say, well, I will make sure that I wanted to get it to you as quickly as possible, but I'll double check it next time.
Okay.
And it should be case closed. Keep your cool, be relaxed, and you will drag people into that mindset. This is a totally different topic. We'll probably talk about it sometime, but if we've got two different mindsets, whoever is more balanced in their own mindset, it's just like, imagine playing tug of war on two giant bouncy balls. That is every conversation that we ever have. Whoever has better balance in their mindset will drag the other person into their mindset. So if you're relaxed and confident, you will drag the other person into your mindset. So if you're cool about it, and you are more cool about it than they are hot about it, you will drag people into your mindset.
Okay.
We'll talk more about that another day. It's really useful. Okay, so thank you very much for that question. So let's talk about, we have time for one more thing. So another related idea is, how do you deal with having anxiety about a problem? So let's just say that, you do have an objective problem, or I'm sorry, that you have anxiety, and you want to know how to approach it. There's basically two reasons that you will have anxiety, or two categories of anxiety, and there's a different way to handle each one. So basically, if you have anxiety about something, you first have to decide whether the anxiety comes from an objective problem or a perceived problem. For example, a perceived problem would be one like a fear of performance. So like if you have performance anxiety, that is a perceived problem. It's not objectively true that you have to have anxiety about a music performance or driving or dogs or anything. So if it's, so that's a perceived one. Some people think about it this way, some people think about it this way. Or it could be an objective problem. An objective problem would be like, if I don't get such and such done, I won't be able to pay this bill. Or, something that is objectively true on paper that is creating anxiety. So that's the first step. Is this issue, am I having anxiety because of how I'm perceiving it? Or am I having anxiety about an issue that is really an objective issue that is in the world? Is it in my head, or is it objectively in the world? That's a good way to describe that. So if it is a problem, we'll start with if it's a mental issue. If it's an issue of, if it's not really a problem, like for example, if someone is if they're afraid of germs and so they won't use public bathrooms, for example, that is objectively, using public bathrooms usually, in a reputable establishment is not objectively a problem. You can do it, and there probably won't be any problem with that. But so it's your mind that's holding you back with this kind of problem. If that's the case, you have to focus on, how am I exacerbating the issue in my mind? What images am I seeing that are, so let's take dogs, for example. I like people afraid of dogs example because it's very concrete and everybody has some kind of experience with dogs. So there's some people who are afraid of dogs. And let's say, you've got a friend who's got a friendly dog. It's a domesticated dog. It's well-trained. It's very friendly. It's going to be friendly, but you're still afraid of it. So that would be definitely a perceived problem. So that problem is best approached by examining how you're thinking about it and thinking about it in a more realistic way. For example, if someone's afraid of dogs, they might imagine the time that they were bit by a dog when they were a young child, and whenever they see any kind of dog, they're imagining that dog biting them, which is not realistic. It's something that happened a long time ago, but it's not going to happen right now when I pet this friendly dog that my friend owns. So that problem has to be solved by correcting how you're visually imagining whatever the issue is. So, for example, if it's your public speaking fear, if you are imagining everyone looking at you or you messing up, those things are not objectively true. It's probably true that they'll be looking at you, but you don't have to focus on that. And when you correct that imagery to instead focus on what your topic is or yourself doing well, we'll probably have another whole day where we talk about public speaking. Actually, we did have one we were talking about public speaking. Then you can correct that issue, and then it's not a problem anymore. So it's something that you can do in your head solely, and then it's not a problem anymore. So noticing, oh man, got that big thunder. I wonder if they can hear that on the microphone. It's like still going on. It's like a 7-second roll of thunder.
What the feedback? Huh?
Yep, exactly. So if you have anxiety and if you decide that it's a perceived problem, something that you're doing in your head to create the anxiety, then you have to identify how you're doing it and correct it to make it more realistic. So when you think about things realistically, so for example, if it's for the dog example, if you imagine the dog coming out, you petting the dog being happy, and then the dog going to lay down, it doesn't create anxiety, even in people who have a phobia of dogs. It's just when they do that other stuff in their head. So that has to be corrected in that case. Okay, so perceived problem, fix how you're saying it in your head. The other type is like an objective problem, which could be, something like, there's a bear that was released in the woods that we're camping in, or something like that. Okay, so that's something that it's still always mental in the sense that you can think about it differently. But when you have an objective problem in the real world, okay, so here, let's use another example. Let's say there's really a rabid dog in your house somewhere right now, and you don't know where it is. That's more of a real problem. That's less of a perceived problem. So if you have an objective problem like that, changing how you think about it is not going to be the primary solution. The primary solution is going to be being action and solution oriented rather than anxiety oriented or problem oriented. So for example, if you get into this anxiety cycle where you're thinking, oh, well, if the dog finds me, he's going to bite me, and then I'm going to have to go to the hospital and maybe I'll die or whatever. If you get into that problem cycle and you focus on the problem, you're going to be less effective and you're going to have more anxiety. On the other hand, if you're solution oriented, you're going to have less anxiety and you're going to be more able to handle the problem. So for example, if you say, okay, well, we don't think he's in this room, so we'll board off this room and we'll call animal control. Suddenly you feel better about that. You don't have as much anxiety. So when you get into the habit of being solution oriented, you will have less anxiety. You'll have more energy to come up with solutions, mental energy, and you'll be better able to be in a solution-oriented point of view. So you'll have more energy for it, and psychologically, you'll be more able to come up with solutions. So if you have a real objective problem, then not that a perceived problem isn't a real problem, but it's just not objective. So we'll say objective or subjective. If you have an objective problem, the best solution is focusing on being solution-oriented, coming up with some kind of plan. And as far as the anxiety is concerned, it almost doesn't even matter what the plan is. One plan might be to blockade the room off. Another plan might be to get on some really thick clothing and gloves and look for the dog. Another solution might be, to to make a bunch of noise and scary sounds to scare the dog away or whatever. And as far as now some of those ideas might be better than the other ideas, but as far as the anxiety is concerned, when you are thinking in a solution-oriented way, you will have less anxiety. It's like your brain's like, okay, it's okay, he's got it handled. Your unconscious is like, oh, okay, he's coming up with ideas now, he's going to do something about it. It's like your child comes out because there's a monster in the closet, and you go in and you do something about it. Almost doesn't matter what you do. The fact that you're doing something about it, you're being solution-oriented. Okay, he's got it handled. So the child will feel more comfortable. That's how your brain is also. Your unconscious will be more comfortable and have more energy to come up with solutions when you are being solution-oriented, when you're being action-oriented. Okay, so if you have anxiety, is it a subjective or objective issue? If it's subjective, try to correct how you're seeing it. It can be a complex issue, which of course I recommend hypnosis and hypnotherapy for that because it happens much more efficiently, but that's going to need to be the solution. And then if you have an objective problem, focusing on being action-oriented and solution-oriented rather than problem-oriented will help you come up with better solutions and decrease your anxiety. So, okay, any questions about anything? Okay, all right, well, that is it for this week. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week on Hypnosis Chat. Thanks.